most people at that time did not believe there could have been humans living in the Americas.
A 100 years ago, this particular locality was the center of the archaeological universe in North America. At that particular time, it represented the first challenge to the established wisdom that humans were recent arrivals in the New World.
This one piece is the oldest artifact, demonstrating right now the oldest, sort of undisputed or unequivocal occupation of the site, that somebody was in fact sitting here making a tool.
Here we are in the sequencing room of our facility near our ancient DNA lab. We're looking at some DNA here from a cetacean species, and this is the kind of sequence we're hunting, we're looking for with the ancient megafauna from the old Vero site.
Florida was known since the mid-1500s to the Spanish and the French that there were deposits of Ice Age animals, extinct animals. And the discovery that was so important was made 100 years ago when the people that lived here were organized enough to want to bring water to to drain the swampy conditions that existed here, and put a drain canal down to the lagoon a mile or two away. So they followed an old stream bed, the von Valkenburg Formation. There were actually more than one, but this area had an ancient stream bed here, and along here you have a tributary that was part of that system. When the canal was being put in 1913, when they dug down, they discovered extinct animal bones, extinct horses, mammoths, mastodons, sloths, saber cats, as well as some animals that exist today.
Amateur fossil hunters came and took whatever they wanted for nearly 100 years until it was protected in 2012.
I'm going to show you a couple of the items, the fossils that have come out of our site. I have a section of a mastodon femur, and as you can see, it's a very thick bone. These are very, very large animals, and probably stood 9 to 10 feet at the shoulder. This bone would have, if I can turn it around, would have oriented in the skeleton like this. It's about probably about 10,000 years old, and was probably a full-grown animal. Inside you can see, gives you an idea of how thick that bone would have been. This is a vertebra dating from about the same period. We're not sure if it's from the same animal, but it's from the same species. The rib would have connected in here, so that would have looked like that. There would have been another rib, of course, on the other side, and as the animal moved, the articulating surfaces, these rounded areas, would have operated something like that. The backbone might have been more rigid, and as the animal breathed, this would go up and down like that. We had a species of giant land tortoise here in Florida during the Ice Age. This happens to be one of the femurs from the animal, probably oriented on its right side. Here you can see the ball. This is the part that fit into the socket. A rather short, curved leg, not so different than modern tortoises, except that this animal during the Ice Age was probably the size of a Volkswagen. They were very huge animals, much larger than the type that's found in the Galapagos Islands today.
The state geologist Dr. Sellards asked them and said, you need to also be sure you don't see some that might be human bones, because he believed they might be there. The La Brea tar pits had been discovered just before that. And within a year or two, sure enough, they came up with some human skeletal material, quite a bit of it actually. 4 different individuals found there and over here, and a little later part of another 5th one over there. And this caused a great deal of controversy because many people, most people at that time, did not believe there could have been humans living in the Americas.
Young archaeologists from all over the USA had come to assist with the dig.
A series of claims were made about the antiquity of human beings at this locality, which for a variety of reasons that we're trying to address were never fully resolved and never fully accepted. At that particular point in time, people were asking fundamental questions like, who were the inhabitants of this particular site? When did they first arrive here? What kinds of things did they make? What sorts of things were they doing? Now we're asking a different set of questions. Because of the extraordinary preservation of plant and animal material at this location, because we now know people were in Florida 14 or 15,000 years ago, we're trying to resolve things like, why were they at this particular spot? How did the various things they do relate to one another and to the broader issue of climatic change at the end of the last ice age? We're using the most precise methodologies known to the field at this particular locality, and hopefully at the end of the project we'll have answers to questions which were unanswered 100 years ago and which represent very new takes on what the first Floridians may have been doing.
We're at the Vero site, where we expect to continue our discovery of significant finds in our in-place sediments dating between 4,000 or 5,000 years at the youngest, and particularly important to us are those dating on the 11,100 to 14,000 year old range. We found a tremendous amount of burnt material, both plant and animal species. So far all representative of the things that have been found here over the years, roughly 180 species of plants and animals, with a great many of those being extinct ones from the Pleistocene. As we recover more and more of that kind of material, we hope to find and expand on the potential for this site to help explain the biotic communities that we see both in the plants and animals that were here, as well as how human beings that arrived in the Pleistocene interacted with them, made their living with them, and of course how they changed over time as the climate fluctuated, the water table came up, and changed a very dry landscape into a rather wet one, as we know from all the canals in Indian River County today. The wealth of species that have been found here indicate a tremendous amount of opportunity and potential. This could be one of the most significant sites in the New World if we continue on the path to demonstrating what we think we're finding right now, and that is namely a human presence at this site older than 11,000 years ago and somewhere in the 12, 13, 14,000 year old range. Of course, of greatest interest to us are how the earliest humans that arrived in the Pleistocene interacted with those plants and animals, how they made their living off of them, and how that changed over time.
During the Ice Age, Florida was very much drier than it is today, and most of it was covered with savanna grassland, just as you get in Africa, with some wooded, forested areas. Vast herds of herbivores would have roamed these savannas, and carnivores to prey on them, along with giant ground sloths. An army of volunteer sievers arrived daily to examine all the debris.
I'm Louise, and actually this is my first time. It's quite interesting. I was here last year, I think in April, I took a very comprehensive tour, and I decided I'd love to do this. So here I am.
Meanwhile, the young archaeologists are doing detailed excavations in the weatherport. More volunteers are sifting through the mountain of excavated dirt. Some will sit here all day with a sieve and a shovel. Detailed examination of every fragment takes place. Nothing is discarded that could be of interest. The detailed sieving of the dirt provides a find.
It's a little exhausted point made out of coral from over near Tampa. The stemmed base and the beveling on the tip of the point tell us that this is what we would call a kirk. Late early archaic point dating between about 8,000 and 9,500 radiocarbon years ago, which means it's a little bit over 10,000 years old. It's only one artifact, but we'll take it.
This is the kind of sequence we're hunting, we're looking for with the ancient megafauna from the old Vero site. So as you can see on the screen, we have these different peaks of different colors. Each color represents a different base. The A, G, C's and T's of our DNA, and along the top you can see the actual sequence of this particular individual. I mean, I think as obviously an early American site, it is one of the most important, but also I think from an ecosystem perspective, the Vero site is becoming, I think, increasingly known as an important site, where we can look at an entire sort of collection of flora and fauna through various time frames, so we can understand more about ecosystem change throughout the millennia. This is sort of the area my group's taking a lot of its research, is trying to understand ecosystem and climate change by looking into the past.
Comprehensive DNA analysis of the First Nation Indian people seemed to prove that they came from Asia, not from Europe as was originally thought. Comparison of the 12,000-year-old skull on the left in comparison to a 1,000-year-old skull on the right of a First Nation person indicate they look very different. Having been lost for nearly 100 years, unfortunately the human bones found by Dr. Sellards have been covered with a brown varnish. I had to leave before the excavations were over, but Dr. Hemmings was kind enough to give me an overview of the results so far. I did this recently via Skype.
We're here at the Vero site, concluding our 2016 excavation in our Big Deep unit. Highlights of this year's finds include exposing a portion of a rather large bone bed. Right now we've probably found 60 different pieces of bone in there, representing at least 2 or 3 species, but the vast majority are from a very large animal. We've got 4 fragments of teeth, or complete teeth, thus far all identified as Bison antiguus, which is an extinct form of bison or buffalo that's been gone for at least 13,000 years, which is good because we found it in a layer dating between 13 and 14,000 years ago, so as we would expect. One of the other highlights really worth mentioning is that in the overburden, the disturbed portions of the site that are sitting on top of the intact portions of the site, we found a textile fragment with at least 3 different kinds of material in it, and we hope to have a lot more to say about that in the near future as well. The fragments of bone we found, at roughly 60 or so that have been at least partially exposed or recovered, some of them more than 1.5 feet long, and again it's slivers, not even complete pieces yet, so they're from a very large animal. It really limits the possibilities to being mammoth, mastodon, one of the 3 sloths, probably not either of the 2 smaller ones, so maybe just Eremotherium would be the possibility, and of course bison. So depending on how we slice it, 4 to 6 species. Some of those bones appear to be burnt, or at least partially burnt, as though they were refuse, maybe thrown into a fire or a hearth. But the new discoveries, both in both layers of the Pleistocene dirt, the 11 to 13 and the 13 to 14,000 years old range, I think we've got to the point where wild horses, or in this case wild bison, would struggle to drag us away from coming back here next year.
Lovely. Andy, thank you very much indeed. Florida has a very extensive series of caves, but to date, No Ice Age cave art has been discovered.